And welcome. Thank you, Mike, for starting the applause. And for all of you who are watching live tonight on LA City View, Channel 35, or live on Facebook, welcome. And we're going to have a lively, great discussion tonight. And it is my privilege to introduce now the city attorney of Los Angeles, who has been a leader in LGBTQ rights long before it was ever fashionable. As a public interest lawyer, head of Betzetic, city council member, an assembly member, and now, of course, is our city attorney, and I don't think it's an accident that this group was able to be formed when Mike Feuer took office. Ladies and gentlemen, a profile in courage, our city attorney, Mike Feuer.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Rob. And in case you're wondering, I have had the mustache during that entire career that Rob just mentioned. So it is great to have a wonderful turnout tonight, a turnout that I think is going to continue to grow as the evening lasts. We have a wonderful panel, and that you'll be introduced shortly. But I want to say, just speaking for myself, how grateful we are in the city attorney's office to have such a terrific team assembled for this discussion tonight. And a couple words before I get into the essence of what brings us together. First, Rob referred to the association that sponsors this event tonight. And you're going to hear in a moment from Steve Houchin, who is the president of the association. Just stand up for a second, Steve, just because I can. See, since I had the microphone, I couldn't start the applause for you, and someone had to be spurred to do that. But the association, as Rob said, is relatively young. It's been around for just a couple years. I am particularly proud that in our office, which has other very important associations, affiliations of individuals from various backgrounds that have come together for years in our office, it was a surprise to me that there was no LGBTQ association when I became city attorney. And it matters a lot that in our office, everyone feels comfortable, proud, included, and deeply valued. And so with that in mind, I'm very, very pleased to be associated with this event tonight, sponsored by this group, Steve, that you and your board lead so ably. So now, what brings us together? I had a press event on another issue this morning, and the reporters and I were talking about the fact that we are almost exactly a year into the Trump administration and what that has meant for our office on a variety of levels. As many of you know, we've sued the administration. We have litigation pending right now over what we allege is the unconstitutional inclusion of immigration factors in public safety grants decision-making. We are very deeply involved in litigation here and around the country. We were the lead public law firm on an amicus brief in the DACA litigation. We've been involved in the Muslim travel ban. As many of you know, I went to the airport a year ago to try to secure the release of the detainees the weekend the Muslim travel ban took effect. I think 11 different briefs throughout the United States. We've been active on many other fronts as well. When the Chief Justice of this state called on Attorney General Sessions and then Secretary Kelly to cease the enforcement of immigration issues at courts around California, and she was responded to in a very direct and aggressive way by those two federal authorities, saying essentially, don't talk to us, talk to your state leaders who've enacted policies that make you less safe. That weekend, our office and Jackie Lacey, our DA, organized prosecutors up and down the state of California to get back to Sessions and Kelly to make a key point, and that is that all of us are less safe when anyone feels reluctant to come forward as a witness or a victim of crime, whether it be in a courthouse or with respect to police, which leads to another issue we've been confronting. Because, as we know, about a year ago, ICE began to make clear that when they announce their presence in Los Angeles, they will do so by saying, knock, 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 police, Doing so undermines 40 years' worth of efforts by LAPD to engender trust among immigrant communities, again, on the same premise that we know that we are all safer when everybody trusts the police and feels comfortable coming forward. And there's been so much more that we've been engaged in. And then came this morning. We were just talking before the event started tonight. Just as I was entering that press conference I referred to, it was announced that the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington was creating a unit designed to advocate for those federal employees who say they will not, because of their views, they will not help people when it comes to very basic health needs. An issue that is going to relate to women asserting their right to make an important choice in their lives, whether to have a child or not, and an issue that's going to confront, among others, transgender members of our society when federal authorities say they don't wish to assist them. Who's next? That really, I think, puts in stark relief what brings us together tonight. We are all wishing that we were in a nation where the values that were expressed by our leadership were those that would unite us, bring us together, find the common ground, and lead us to look to each other as sources of strength, where we appreciate and respect each other. That has not been the track record in the first year of the Trump administration, and all of us are hoping very much that that changes. But in the meantime, as long as that remains the case, that puts special obligations on each of us to stand up for what we believe in, to take the time away from what otherwise might distract us in our daily lives, to assert what matters most. Because none of us wants to look back on this period in history and ask, where were we? Were we on the sidelines? Were we spectators? I don't think this is a moment that any of us can afford to be a spectator. So in that spirit, we've assembled this group tonight with very fine moderation from Brian Pendleton. He'll be introduced in a moment. A terrific team. I had the opportunity to serve in the state legislature with one of the presenters tonight, with Ricardo Lara, who has now ascended to the state senate, still has jazzy socks and the best-looking ties in Sacramento. But in all seriousness, Ricardo has been a leader of great substance, and everybody else we're going to be introducing has as well. So for tonight, thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting the work of the City Attorney's Office LGBTQ Association. And I'm looking around the room at many people who I know personally have taken stands, not always when it was popular, either as lawyers or as advocates in the community. Thank you for doing that and for setting an example from which all of us in American society could benefit. Now, back to Rob Wilcox, the most extraordinary director of community education and outreach that this office has at this moment. Thanks, Rob.
That's almost how I wrote it for you, but not quite. City Attorney Mike Fiore. Thank you, Mike. All right, I just want to let you know that this event, of course, is free, and through the donations and membership support for our employee association, we're able to put this event on, and we're going to have forms out here during the reception. For those of you who are members of the City Attorney's Office, it's time to renew your membership, and it can be any amount or no amount whatsoever. Whatever you want to give is greatly appreciated. For all of you who are joining us from outside the City Attorney's Office, if you want $5, $10, $20, anything is appreciated, because then we can have more of these events. And these are important evenings and discussions to have. I wish that we could have this outside of Los Angeles and all across the United States, so that we can talk to those that may not be in Los Angeles, that may not be like-minded, and we can just discuss the issues. We're going to have that here tonight. And so it is my pleasure to introduce the president of the City Attorney's LGBTQ Employees Association and the neighborhood prosecutor of Hollywood, Steve Houchin.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is an outstanding turnout for such an important event. I'm Steve Houchin. I'm the president of our Employees Association. And before we get started, I wanted our board to stand wherever you are. We have some here, some in the back, but our board put together this great event. So if you could stand and please recognize the board. Back there. Fantastic group. You know, the first thing that we said when we were planning this event on a year after Trump was, where do we even start? And, you know, we're barely going to have time to get started, but we need to start this conversation, and we need to be here for that reason. Before I introduce our moderator, though, I wanted to start with a moment of silence for LGBTQ victims, particularly victims of hate crimes perpetuated by hate crime suspects. Very recently, if you hadn't heard, in Los Angeles, we lost a 33-year-old transgender woman named Vicky Gutierrez, who was brutally stabbed to death. And our applause and gratitude to the Los Angeles Police Department, who quickly apprehended that suspect and who is now charged with murder. But Vicky was just one of many victims who we're disturbingly seeing more frequently. I don't think people like Vicky would want to be remembered as victims. I think that Vicky would want to be remembered like all of our victims of hate crimes as individuals who had the courage to live openly and freely, and I think they would want us to remember them that way and use their lives as a spark to encourage others to live the way they lived and to fight for not only ourselves but each other as a team, because that's what this is going to take. So if we could just take a moment in your own way of silence for these individuals. Thank you very much. So now, on a more lighthearted note, I get to introduce our moderator, Brian Pendleton, who Brian is an LA-based philanthropist, activist, and entrepreneur. He serves as a commissioner on our police and fire pension board, and most recently, and probably most notably, I think, was the founder and creator of, you all know of the Resist March. I think many of you probably were there. A hugely successful peace march that occurred last summer. Brian was the organizer, the creator, and assembled a great team of people from all over to create that great event, which was a very peaceful, important march against the policies that are coming out of Washington. So it's my great privilege and pleasure. I worked personally with Brian. He's a fantastic guy, and we're in good hands. A round of applause for Brian Pendleton.
Sing one, two. All right. How's everyone doing? You ready for an exciting event here? Great. So here we are, 1 year after Trump, and it's kind of terrible, and I think we'll be discussing that in a minute. You know, when he got elected, that was the last thing we thought would happen, that people would actually pull that lever for Trump. And they did, and we don't know why. We're still reeling and still trying to figure it out, but facts are facts. We have Trump in the White House. And mostly what we had that day was fear of the future. What is going to happen with Trump? And then the next day, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, the day after we had that terrible inauguration, women from all over the world gathered and they marched through the streets. And guess where the biggest one was? Right here in Los Angeles. But women from all over the world marched to say, Trump, we're going to keep an eye on you. We are going to keep an eye on you. And even at that very point, we didn't know what kind of president we were going to have until Spicy took the stand the next day and said that it was the largest inauguration the world has ever seen, and no mention of the Women's March. And we knew we were in for big trouble. And at that point, the LGBTQ community wanted to do something bigger, wanted to do something better for themselves, wanted to make a stand just like the women and inspired by the women. And so we came together and created Resist March. And I think what's really important about that, I want you to know as we stand here in the city's city hall, in the council chambers, in the second largest city in the country, but probably most important city in the country. We have a city attorney that has opened up the doors and has invited us in here to talk about our issues. Not just to talk about what the problems are, but to talk about what the solutions are. So I want one more hand for Mike Fuhr, a hand for Rob Wilcox and Steve Houchin for putting this thing together. We couldn't have done it without you. We couldn't have done Resist March without you. You can't walk 100,000 people down the streets of Los Angeles without this city attorney saying yes. And I can tell you, he not only said yes, he said yes first. His name was on our website first. And when you do something like that, it makes it easier for people, like people in this room, for Koretz and Martinez and O'Farrell, to say yes. So once again, I want to say thank you to the city attorney. And without further ado, let's start our panel. Please welcome Jocelyn Samuels, is Executive Director of the UCLA School of Law's Williams Institute on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Law and Public Policy. She is one of the country's leading civil rights experts. Ms. Samuels was the Director of the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. How exciting. We have a lot to talk to you about today about that. Where she oversaw civil rights enforcement with respect to hospitals, healthcare providers, insurance, and human service organizations. Please welcome her to the stage. Jocelyn. Wherever you want. We are also honored to have State Senator Ricardo Lara represents the 33rd District. Please welcome the Senator. Senator, I just want you to know I'm wearing my California socks. I hear you wear pretty cool, good socks. Not today, sorry about that. He made history in 2012 by becoming the first openly gay person of color elected to the California State Senate. We're very honored to have you, and you've done a lot of great work. And also, please welcome to the stage Nancy Marcus, is the Law and Policy Senior Attorney at Lambda Legal. Another interesting fact is that I refuse to feel like I'm 50 years old, even though I am, so I printed my questions really small on the paper, so I might need some help if you don't mind. Let's start with Jocelyn. Help us frame the conversation at a high level. Really, what has Trump been doing since he's taken office? And just sort of frame the conversation for us.
Well, first of all...
But get that mic real close. You might even want to take it off the stand if... There you go.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Rob and Steve and the city attorney. Thanks to my co-panelists. It's such an honor to be here with all of you and to be engaged in this dialogue with everyone in the audience, because there is nothing more important than having our community understand the challenges that we face and band together to ensure that we can surmount them. And I will say the anniversary of the Trump inauguration is also the anniversary of the day I lost my job. So that was sort of the least of the country's concerns at that point in time, but it loomed pretty large for me. I had been a civil rights enforcement attorney for the Obama administration. And I perhaps can remind you that the Obama administration did an extraordinary amount to expand rights and protections for the LGBTQ community. So, for example, the Obama administration took the position that gender identity discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination, and sex stereotyping are forms of sex discrimination that are prohibited by existing law. The Trump administration has overturned that position and, in fact, has decided on its own initiative to weigh in court cases to say, never mind, the laws do not protect the LGBT community from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. If it happens to them, we're sorry, but there's no legal recourse on a federal level. The Obama administration also went to great lengths to ensure that the LGBT community could get the health care that it needs, like every other individual and community in the United States and the world, and to do what it could to expand access to care and health insurance coverage by making clear that discrimination based on sex stereotyping and gender identity was barred under the law, and that things like categorical exclusions from insurance coverage for transition care were unlawful under the Affordable Care Act. That is also on its way out. The administration has signaled very clearly that it does not believe that health care discrimination against the LGBT community is prohibited under the law. And in fact, today, as you heard, went as far as to make a structural change that I think reflects a real reordering of the office's priorities. So whereas the mission of the Office for Civil Rights has always been to expand access to health care and health coverage, today the Office of the Civil Rights under the Trump administration took the step of enhancing its commitment and resources devoted to defending people who deny care, rather than expanding the options for care for vulnerable communities. This is also the administration that attempted to ban transgender patriots from serving in the military. It's the administration that has tried to roll back efforts to collect data about sexual orientation and gender identity so that we can figure out what policy interventions will help address the challenges we face. This is the administration that has tried to roll back DACA and the ACA. And I could go on, but my
She's going to cover every topic.
And I will look forward to discussing any of these in more detail.
And we're so lovely that you're here, and we really appreciate it. Obviously, when you have laws passed like this, or you have you have a president that issues proclamations like this, you have the courts. We have the courts to protect us. Nancy, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the court system?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, and I want to again thank everybody who's been involved in planning this, who attended today. We're really happy to be here, but unhappy about the things that we have to report to you and talk about today. Just to add a couple more things to the list that Jocelyn just gave us, one of the very first things that Trump did when he took office was he rescinded the executive order that President Obama had issued that required federal contractors to report on incidents of discrimination. And so there's no longer that transparency and that accountability when discrimination occurs in workplaces that are run by federal contractors. And so about the courts, the interesting thing about this reversal of the position that sex discrimination does include sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, and if I could, just a quick explanation of that. The reason why, conceptually, Lambda Legal and others across the country have successfully persuaded the courts to go along with what the EEOC is still affirming, is that if somebody's discriminated against on the basis of the sex of their partner, that's a form of sex discrimination, because the only thing that's really changed is the sex of who you're dating. Gender identity, for decades, the courts have recognized that gender nonconformity is a form of, in the sense that if you're discriminated against for being gender nonconforming, that's a form of sex discrimination. So if gender nonconformity is potentially a target of sex discrimination, so is being, your gender identity. I mean, if you're transgender, that's kind of the ultimate gender nonconformity. So it's just logical to recognize that sex discrimination includes sexual orientation, gender identity discrimination. Okay, so the EEOC is there, and they're still there. So we have cases where the Department of Justice is filing briefs saying, no, we don't think that sexual orientation and gender identity are protected, and they're going directly against the EEOC, another federal agency, saying, well, yes, they are. And the DOJ is even going against the EEOC and the EEOC's own cases. So the EEOC has a bit more independence from the Trump administration as independent agency than the DOJ does, which is somewhat explains that. But those cases are still ongoing. And Lambda Legal had a Seventh Circuit victory that did affirm that sexual orientation and gender identity are protected under federal Title VII law. We have pending cases still in New York and Georgia, Second Circuit, Fourth Circuit, Eighth Circuit. Our sister organizations have cases across the country. This issue is also coming up in the context of Title IX protections for education, the protections against discrimination in educational contexts and also in other contexts. So we're not conceding that Trump has reversed that, and the EEOC doesn't agree that Trump has reversed that.
And for everyone, including me, EEOC?
Yeah. The EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which enforces Title VII, which is the federal employment discrimination statute. If I could, I'd like to talk about some other court battles, or what do you think?
We'll wind back around. I'd like to ask Senator Lara. So we have legislation that's really not leaning in our favor, and we have courts that could potentially be packed with Trump confirmed people. Is California a sanctuary state? What does sanctuary state mean?
I don't know. You tell me. You guys are the lawyers here. We've never called it a sanctuary state bill because there's no such thing as that. I think it was just what was pitched in the media. But, for us in California, and I love having this, huge room and opportunity to have a mutual therapy session, because those are always good. And like you all, I didn't leave my house for 4 days after the election, trying to figure out what was going to happen. And so, I think you all know that California is really the epicenter of the resistance for this administration. And what we decided to do in the legislature is double down on who we are and our values as Californians, understanding that it was going to be ruthless, that it was going to be tiring, but that every day that we got up in the legislature, we had to figure out how to outsmart not only this entire administration, this president, but this growing sentiment of what it means to be American and what it means to be a Californian. And so we have worked with our partners, not only here, but throughout the entire state and country, who are looking towards California to really be that roadblock, whether it's not only changing laws, changing regulations, ensuring that we continue to provide the critical protections. And that's one part is defense, but then also playing offense and going bolder and bigger on when it comes to progressive policies that are going to protect ourselves from the federal administration. And the fact is that we've proven that we can be a progressive state, we can be unapologetic about who we are. Not only is the sky not going to fall, but we're going to succeed economically. Now, given what the UK has done to themselves under Brexit, which is, really in line to what's happening to us at the federal level, because we know what really Brexit was about, they've harmed themselves economically. And California surpassed the UK, becoming now the 5th largest economy in the world. So regardless of what people in Texas, Arkansas, Florida say, those crazies in California, our economy continues to grow. It continues to expand and diversify under this hostile environment that we have from the federal government. Now, we've also, the fear and the irony of this is when we were having these discussions amongst our colleagues is, are we poking the bear? Are we, by doing this, are we actively now signaling to the Trump administration, hey, we're here, we're going to fight you? And what does that mean for our most vulnerable, right? What does that mean for our LGBTQ community? What does this mean for our immigrant community? That, quite frankly, has never had a friendly administration, even under the Obama administration. I mean, if you look at healthcare, they were able to protect our LGBT community, but undocumented immigrants clearly continue to be discriminated against and being able to access the Affordable Care Act. That is changing now in this state because for the first time ever, we want non-immigrants or non-recent immigrants to feel part of this immigration movement. And I think we finally have gotten there, and this is why our LGBT community has been so successful in protecting our rights, because we've allowed and invited other people that are not from our community to be part of this, this movement. And so we're seeing that happen now with the Dreamers.
Absolutely, and I can say, proudly, in fact, the person who came up with this idea is in the room. When we did Resist March, we said when they come for one of us, they come for all of us, and we can't forget that. And so I'm interested about the sort of federal level and state level, since you work for Health and Human Services, you're very in tune with what's going on there, and so at that level, they're saying you don't have to work on it. You don't have to provide service to a trans person, and we know trans lives matter. So what happens when the federal government says that, but the state government says the opposite? What are we going to do here?
So, I invite Senator Lara and Nancy both to weigh in on this because
Absolutely.
I'm sure they have lots of interesting things to say. States have a lot of leeway to step in where the federal government has pulled back. And that is one of the things that we work on at the Williams Institute to do analyses, for example, of the really extraordinary costs of failing to bar discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity at the state level, or the cost of enacting religious exemptions from compliance with civil rights laws, because states can't do less than the federal government. The federal government sets the floor for civil rights, but they can always do more. And states like California have done more. And there are numerous states around the country that are stepping up, none more so than California, to make clear that they are going to enact laws that respect human dignity and that restore some of the rights that are left at the federal level. Unfortunately, there are still 28 states that don't bar discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity under state law. There are still 10 or 12 states that have religious exemptions that allow entities to self-proclaim that it is contrary to their moral judgments to provide service to LGBT individuals. There are still states that are trying to enact bathroom bills to prevent people from the simple act of using the restroom in a way that reflects their identity. So there's a lot of work to be done to defend against rollbacks in states that don't have protections. But there's also a lot to celebrate in states like California.
Even in California, where we have the most expansive protections of civil rights for our LGBTQ community, we were looking at the fact that employment rights weren't extended to our trans community. And we know that if we're really going to talk about self-empowerment and civil rights, we have to ensure that all of us in this room have the equal opportunity to build wealth for ourselves, to be able to build a career and provide for ourselves and our families. We were seeing that California still lacked protections and actually anti-discrimination training for our transgender workers. So we quickly introduced a bill that was signed into law that I authored called the Transgender Worker Protection Act that now equates our transgender workers just as they were any protected class from any type of discrimination in the workforce. And we know that our transgender community, in particular transgender immigrants, are highly susceptible to still harassment, discrimination, and abuse in the workforce. And there's no type of education for employers to figure out how you protect your trans workers, which ultimately resulted in the transgender worker being fired. And if a person cannot provide for their family, where do they end up? In the streets. And so this is a bill that got signed last year by the governor, making us, again, California, the state and the first to implement legislation to specifically protect our transgender workers.
Could I also add just one thing, which is that not only states, but local jurisdictions can do more as well. And Los Angeles has done a lot. But you can do things at the county level. You can do things at the city level. And it's important to know that all of us in this room have the power to weigh in with our local representatives and city council members to ensure that our cities and the places where we live reflect the values that we want them to.
I have a few actually positive things to say. I seem to be like doing this silver lining, glasses half full approach. But first, I wanted to applaud Senator Laura for his leadership on some of these issues. It really has made a difference to the people of California, and we raised the bar for the rest of the nation that's looking at us for leadership. So that's really important. At the state level, the glass is not maybe half full, but the silver lining is that around half of the bills that states tried to pass across the country last year were bills that targeted transgender people. They thought that transgender people would be an easy target, and they were wrong. Not one of those bills passed. So across the country, LGBT organizations and our allies, including the business community, really rallied to our cause because people are humans. They really don't want to be a part of that kind of discrimination, and there's a price tag. It came out that in North Carolina, that horrible anti-trans attack cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars. So once the business community started seeing that, that kind of motivated them to come to our side too. So they were not successful in targeting transgender people in state legislation last year. At the federal level, there's been a recent victory under Title IX, which I said was the education federal bill. There's a student in Kenosha United School District, Whitaker versus Kenosha United School District, which is Wisconsin, I think. The Supreme Court denied cert, meaning they turned down the case, but that meant that the Seventh Circuit Federal Court of Appeals decision stands, and that decision said that transgender students are protected under Title IX. And that goes to that sex discrimination issue too, because Title IX talks about sex discrimination protections. That includes protecting transgender students. So there are other trans students who have cases as well. And I got to say, the trans military ban, of course, is a huge issue. And we have been successful, too, in pushing back against that. There are several cases across the country in Washington State, Washington, D.C., and Maryland. And all of the organizations that are challenging the trans military ban have been successful every step of the way.
I mean, then help me understand the Supreme Court's thinking here, because there was a bill passed in Mississippi, the Religious Freedom Bill, that they refused to hear, which now means that the one remaining LGBTQ person that lives in Mississippi can be discriminated against.
Oh, I'd push back against that too.
Okay.
Okay. So 1523, the bill in Mississippi, is one of the worst bills that you can possibly imagine. The bill goes much farther than these RFRA bills you may have heard about. This bill actually says, it codifies discrimination. It says if it's against your moral beliefs that transgender people should even exist, that sex outside marriage is okay, that same-sex marriage is okay. Any of these belief systems that you disagree with, you can discriminate as long as you cite your moral or religious beliefs. So the Supreme Court, for procedural reasons, they basically said the case isn't ripe yet. We need plaintiffs who've actually been injured. That doesn't mean that it's okay at all. So
in the meantime, what's the reality for the LGBTQ community in Mississippi in the meantime?
In the meantime is as soon as somebody is harmed, we want them to contact us so that we will
say your phone number to the camera, wherever it is.
Actually, anybody who's been discriminated against on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or their HIV positive status, please contact Lambda Legal Help Desk. Google it, easy to find. We're there for you.
Senator Laura, what else are you working on to sort of help move our LGBTQ issues forward in the state?
Yeah, what we've been, as we build our agenda now, and I'm proud to say that in the California LGBT caucus is not only the largest in the country, but it's also the most diverse. For the first time, we have API members, Latinos, we have lesbian Latinas elected to office from Stockton. Everybody knows something's happening in Stockton because they elected a lesbian and a lesbian Latina in the Assembly and in the Senate. So good things are happening in Stockton. And
party in Stockton.
Right, totally. And for us now as the Gay Caucus, we're looking at how do we continue to protect our LGBTQ seniors when it comes to their access to healthcare, to housing, and also looking at our conversion therapy laws, which, by the way, do not stop at the age of 18. So we're going to ensure we expand that as well. and that we also continue to work on decriminalizing HIV status and removing all the awful statutes that have been put in the California Code that literally criminalize folks that are HIV positive. And so, we have a lot of work to do still in our state, but, it's really empowering to see how members that are not of our community really rush to try to find legislation that protects our community. And that is something that we should really be proud of. It got to the point where we, at our gay caucus meeting, said, are we going to carry any gay bills ourselves, or is all our allies going to carry the bills? Which is a great place to be, right? You want to be able to normalize our rights and ensuring that other folks get to carry the legislation. By the way, I have to just give a shout out to Senator Toni Atkins from San Diego, who now becomes not only the first female, but first openly LGBTQ senator to lead our California State Senate as our senator, our California President Pro Tem. That is a huge victory for our community as well.
It was just brought up here just a moment ago. I mean, it's a topic that comes up, less and less every year. It's concerning to me, especially, and that's the idea of HIV and AIDS. And in 1995, Bill Clinton created a special advisory council for AIDS, and one of my very good friends, Scott Hitt, was the first chairman of that council, and it was just dissolved via FedEx, I understand. So each member would just receive a FedEx saying, "We don't need you anymore." So what does that mean about the federal government's policy on HIV and AIDS? There's 1.2 million people or more that are impacted.
Even before that happened, 6 members had resigned, including Scott Shottis, who's Lambda Legal's HIV project director, because it became apparent as soon as Trump took office that he was hostile to HIV prevention and treatment. He immediately, one of the first things he did was he took down the website for the Office of National AIDS Policy. He did not, replace anybody to lead that. And by his dismantling, the rest of PACHA and basically firing everybody on it, he couldn't be more clear about his hostility. And he's even made really gross comments using HIV as a weapon against the immigrant community. You may have heard about his comment that all immigrants from Haiti have AIDS. And the impact of this is really quite dire, because it used to be the case that, through PACHA, people had a direct line. And what they had there was a committee that was made up of medical professionals, health officials, lawyers, and people the most directly impacted, people who were HIV positive, who were able to give information to HHS, informed medical information to help them make policies to help with AIDS prevention, HIV transmission prevention. And so that line of communication has been shut down completely. And the people who are affected are not just gay and bisexual men, but also drug users are the increased rate of HIV transmission among drug users is rising. And here Trump is claiming to care about the opioid crisis. But does he really care when he turns his back on people who are at risk of HIV and AIDS? People in low-income communities, people of color, people in the Midwest and the South are disproportionately affected. And so, as a result, more people are going to get HIV and more people are going to die.
I guess I would just, Nancy and I are going to have a little role reversal here, because I will come up with a small silver lining, which is, having been a part of the federal government, I can say what she has been describing is very damaging, and it is indicative of, at best, an indifference, and at worst, a callousness toward the lives of vulnerable people that is deeply, deeply troubling. But that said, there are really committed career employees still in the federal government who care about the original mission of their agencies and who really do see the government as a force for promoting social good. And that is true, for example, at the National Institutes of Health, which is still doing extensive research on HIV and AIDS and running clinical trials and doing everything it can to advance science-based, evidence-based research despite the rhetoric and the lack of leadership from the top.
It's not just the rhetoric. The rhetoric is terrible, and we could talk for days about that. And it's not just lack of leadership, it's lack of money. I mean, the latest budget had a huge cut to AIDS research. I mean, it's damaging all the way around.
That is absolutely right, and that is part of the reason that all of us as citizens should be exercising our rights to weigh in with our members of Congress to ensure that they know that these budget priorities are not acceptable and that depriving these communities in need is an extraordinarily cruel and potentially life-threatening thing to do.
And another way that people who are living with HIV and AIDS are affected is the attacks on Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in general. But the vast majority of people who are living with HIV rely on Medicaid for their health care. So, yeah.
And so at the state level, we've literally put millions of dollars of our own budget to protect the programs that we have at the state level to ensure that folks living with HIV are still getting the meals they need, are still getting the medication, are being able to be seen by a doctor. And although we've rapidly been able to make these budget allocations, unfortunately, other states that are not in the economic situation that we are cannot do that or don't have the will to do that, simply because they're not supportive. But it's a constant thing for us, right? When DACA was threatened, we put $20 million to ensure that our attorneys that are working with these clients actually can, keep fighting for these kids. The Office of HIV/AIDS and the state, we gave money for that. And so we're constantly trying to do what we can to offset those tremendous budget cuts to protect our Californians. But it's unfortunate for other folks that live in other states that don't have states that are friendly.
Well, and that's why I say California is a sanctuary state. Even if it's not officially a sanctuary state, people should come here because there isn't a more sort of progressive, advanced thinking sort of society in the country than right here, and it's really thanks to people like you. I know that there's a lot of people out here, and we really wanted to hear from you. Hopefully, you're getting some of your questions answered. But does anyone out there have a question they'd like to ask of the panel? I'll slow down as the person with the microphone is running to get the microphone.
In the back.
All the way
in.
We have this one. Hello.
Oh, there you go.
Who has a question?
He's coming to you.
Oh. We'd like you to stay on topic.
Hi, my name is Jeff, and I'm with an organization, StandRightNow.org, standing for Stop Tenant Abuse, Neglect, and Dehumanization. This past year, as a gay man living here in LA, I had my head cracked open. We gave flyers to most of the people coming in. And also, my building manager made a gun threat at me, and then he began wearing a Hitler shirt. As you all have gotten a flyer, or most of you have gotten a flyer, he began wearing a Hitler shirt, and that's where we think it went beyond just a tenant-landlord issue and then escalated into a public threat issue. I've endured months of abuse. Bear with me here. Yeah. So, inspired by Rose McGowan and Kathy Griffin, who declares herself the mayor of Zero F'sville, I'd like to talk about what can LGBT megagroups do. What can LGBT megagroups like Lambda Legal do other than just give me referral runaround? I've also reported this abuse, which is documented on YouTube, to the city attorney's office, and I get basically no help. So how can we, I'm more worried about the wall of indifference at the city attorney's office. As a gay activist, I get my head cracked open and no charges filed. I get a Hitler shirt manager making a gun threat at me, no charges filed. So how can we take seriously all this kind of nice-sounding words when, as a gay man getting beaten here in the city of LA, I basically get no help. And when I go to LGBT megagroups, I basically get no help.
It's unfortunate that has happened to you. And I did read recently that the hate crimes are on the rise across the country, and unfortunately even here in Los Angeles. And mostly people tie that to rhetoric from our president, giving people the permission to act out. So the sooner we get rid of Trump, the better. Any other questions?
I bet when you sort of look at a map of California, you have very, very blue California coming down the coast, and then very sort of maybe red California. How is that battle going in the redder parts of the state, and what have you found is the most effective tool in changing the hearts and minds there?
Well, I'll tell you what we've seen, and like I mentioned earlier, in Stockton, the election of an openly gay state senator and an assembly member shows that we're changing attitudes. And I think the important thing is for people to be out and to people to be community leaders in their community, and that changes things. I'll tell you, I've traveled all over the state, and we are everywhere, and we work in every industry. The difference that I've seen now since the Trump administration is that people are being very proactive of not only talking about their families, being out and proud about who they are, but actually now being civically engaged in a way that they weren't before, because they feel that it's part of their obligation to be able to combat what's happening at the federal level. And that's changing hearts and minds. I'll tell you, when we first had our gay pride celebration in the state capitol, all the Republicans and some Democrats would actually walk out of the chamber as we were, celebrating folks from across the state. That no longer happens. And you have some of the most conservative Republicans that still exist in California and get elected now feel compelled to stay. And so it's changing, even in the red parts. And anywhere that I go and with our colleagues, so our gay caucus makes it a point not to come to LA Pride, not to go to San Francisco Pride. We're actually going to Fresno Pride. We're going to Bakersfield Pride, Merced Pride, because we want people to see that they're being supported as well. And there's so many young people in those communities that want to stay there, that want to go to school and come back and change those communities for better. And that's what we need to do, encourage folks. And although we want more people to come to California, that look at what that's happened to the middle of the country over generations. There's a flight of progressive values to the coasts, and we're left with, the red middle. And so we want to encourage people to, and we support them as well, right? With resources. This is why I believe the work that the Victory Fund is doing to fully fund elected officials and candidates in the South is critical. And we're getting victories in the South. We're getting victories in these small school districts throughout the red parts of California even. So, people I think feel emboldened. Just as the right's emboldened, I think our community is emboldened as well to be out and proud and be now civically engaged in a way that we haven't seen before.
Hi, thank you guys so much, seriously, for being here tonight. It means a lot to all of us, and an amazing turnout. Thank you all for being here tonight, because we're all up for the same fight. My name is Robin. I am a council member with our Hollywood United Neighborhood Council, as well as I manage an apartment building within the jurisdiction of that. And on council, I am starting an LGBT committee. Now, the building that I manage, about 50% of my tenants are also LGBT. We have them all, which is wonderful. I need to know that they're safe. We're in the middle of Hollywood. We know my wife works for the Los Angeles LGBT Center. I think I'm kind of immersed in it. Anyway, we know the violence that's on the rise, not globally, not only globally, but right here within LA and Hollywood. Our growing population of our trans community that are affected on the streets every night. We have our center, know that it's there for all of us. What I want to know is, I'm starting a committee, and again, this is just very local because our borders, our boundaries for our neighborhood council is from Western to Cahuenga, the middle of Hollywood, and then up towards the hills. It's a very small area, but I'd like to start something to start this mass conversation to other neighborhood councils, to know that you guys can go to your neighborhood councils and at least help or ask for help or whatever. With that, Lambda Legal, I would like to be able to know, do I have any way of having conversation with you that I could introduce in? Is there any recommendations to offer on any one of your parts towards any of the neighborhood councils that are here tonight? Or anything like that. In other words, because we do have the heightened, and then today our wonderful bomb that went off about discrimination, I need to relay not only to my tenants of my building, again, half the tenants of my building are LGBTQ, but our council, our neighborhood, things like that. And again, I'd like to get that started, and we're still at the grassroots stages of adding this committee to our council. So if there's anyone that you can recommend that I speak with, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I really applaud you for wanting to do that work, and I think that's a great idea. I would encourage you to contact me after today, and we can kind of brainstorm together. It's not the type of work that Lambda Legal typically does because we have more of a national focus, but we can definitely talk about possibilities on the more local level. Do you have any? No.
You missed me by a block, otherwise I would join you, unfortunately.
But I do think that this illustrates it takes a village to really move toward the vision of the society in which we want to live. And it takes people talking to each other on the ground and organizing at the neighborhood level. It takes policymakers on city councils, on school boards, in the state legislatures. It takes litigators who are going to hold decision makers accountable. It takes researchers who can supply the data and the evidence so that good policies can be made. It takes all of us in this room becoming recommitted to the struggle. And so it's terrific that you are exercising this leadership, and I think it's a model for all of us to follow.
Do we have another question? Yeah.
So to follow up on the discussion about slashing the Medicaid budget, I'm curious if there are other policies of this administration that might have a similar unexpected but disparate impact on the LGBT community that maybe aren't getting enough attention because they don't explicitly target that community.
Oh, I was actually going to, I'll prepare to jump on other ways that they're targeting the community. But actually, Jocelyn.
Yeah. I would say, we have done research on what the impact of rollback of the ACA would mean for the LGBT community, what the elimination of DACA would mean for the LGBT community, because we did analyses that suggest that there are 36,000 dreamers who are LGBT who are at risk of deportation if DACA, in fact, is not continued. So there are any number of fact sheets on our website that identify that. For example, the recent announcement that Medicaid was going to impose work requirements. Well, guess what? That really does affect the LGBT community because there are thousands of LGBT people who are not on disability but are unable to work, some undoubtedly because they can't get jobs because of the discrimination against them, who are going to be in this no-win situation where they'll no longer be eligible for Medicaid because they can't get jobs that show that they should be eligible for Medicaid. So I encourage you to come to our website. We do have a host of materials. Some of them are even findable on our website, although I will say it's going to be improved. We are revamping it. And it will help you to understand that we as a community have a real stake in all of these larger battles as well.
Right, and that's very important because the Williams Institute is doing a phenomenal job of reiterating the fact that we're in every community. We look like everyone else. And that is so important for those of us that are not white males and are in this movement as well. Because there's that stereotype, right? Even now in state departments, we see, oh, well, that doesn't affect the gay community. That, this issue shouldn't be your issue. And we're like, wait a minute, we're everywhere. And if you look, before they were called Dreamers, they were called AB 540 students, which is a bill that I worked on as a staffer to allow for undocumented students to pay in-state tuition. That was in 2001. And we purposely seeked out LGBTQ undocumented students because we knew that if they got deported, we could fight for them to get some sort of refugee status or asylum because they're LGBTQ and they could not be returned to El Salvador, to Guatemala, or Mexico because they would be persecuted. And so that was very, very something that we did intentionally. And to see now that the leaders of this Dreamer movement still continue to be LGBTQ undocumented students goes to show that we're everywhere. And they are undocumented and unafraid, and they always talk about coming out of the closet twice.
I'd add just one more thing where there actually is a, I think, disproportionate and perhaps somewhat surprising impact on LGBT people, that our research shows that rates of incarceration for the LGBT community vastly outstrip those for any other community, and that something like 60% of the young women who are in juvenile facilities are sexual minorities and at greater risk for sexual assault and harassment in those facilities. So not only are we everywhere, but there are particular risks that our community faces.
I want to applaud the Williams Institute's website, too, and encourage you all to look at it because it has incredible information. Lambda Legal always refers to Williams Institute studies and data in our briefs to the courts because facts matter. But also speaking about the intersectionality, a number of LGBT organizations, including Lambda Legal, filed friend of the court amicus briefs in like the Muslim ban case. Because another thing that really hurts us all is when the Trump administration uses religion as a weapon or singles out certain types of religions for different treatment, encourages violence, which is in essence what the attack on the Muslim community does. All of these things, we argued in our brief to the courts, affect the LGBT community too, because but by attacking one of us, yes, you're attacking all of us, and there are many immigrants and people of color and people of all faiths within the LGBT community, but also this government position of encouraging violence and encouraging discrimination, encouraging religious discrimination is harmful to LGBT communities in particular ways as well.
Nancy, but arm us here. I mean, people would say freedom of religion means I can treat you as how I want to treat you. How do I respond to that person who believes that that is their freedom to not bake my cake or serve me food or give me life-saving service?
Okay, so first of all, freedom of religion is absolutely a fundamental right. Absolutely, okay? But that does not mean it's a license to discriminate and to harm people. So the difference between having beliefs, the government cannot prevent you from having religious beliefs, but it's well established through decades of court decisions that doesn't mean that discriminatory conduct, that harmful conduct is okay just because you do it in the name of religion. And that is the issue, as many of you probably know, in the pending Supreme Court case, the Masterpiece Cake Shop case that I think all of us submitted amicus briefs in, as well as people across the country, because it really is a critical issue, and hopefully the court will rule the right way and recognize that no matter how much of a fundamental right freedom of religion is, it does not mean that you can carve out exemptions from civil rights protections and anti-discrimination laws and say, I can do whatever the heck I want to people as long as I say I'm doing it because of my religious beliefs.
Absolutely. And the same with Dreamers and people with DACA status. You know, I'm constantly bombarded when I decide to listen to other sources of media. Well, they broke the law. Why are we giving up our jobs and our treasure and our homes to people who broke the law? What do I say back to those people?
Well, yeah, I'm the classic case of somebody who came with two undocumented parents, and we lived over 10 years. My parents lived here over 10 years as undocumented immigrants, so I'm the classic job stealer. Good job. I earned my job. I didn't steal anybody's, but I think what we need to do as immigrant community is continue to allow our allies to be part of this movement. There was nothing more beautiful that I saw than all, not only celebrities, but very well-known folks wearing We're All Dreamers shirts, right? And the reaction to some of the folks in the community were like, oh God, it's going mainstream. I'm like, it has to. We have to allow folks to be able to empower them with information to fight back, because that's how we change culture. And for us, what you tell those folks is listen, we all come here with a dream, and I think we've kind of skewed the whole issue of the American dream. The fact is, people come to this country not in search of an American dream, or they don't necessarily find the American dream. They actually bring the American dream with them. And this has happened over generations and generations. This is why one election is not going to determine who we are as Americans or as Californians. We're going to continue to prove that we're diverse. We come from every part of the world. And this is why it's important for us to have those conversations, even within our own family. And just as the right is doing the same thing, they feel emboldened to discriminate, well, we have to be right there to not only question, but fight back. And most of the time, that's even our own families.
Okay, can I just say how ironic it is that the same administration, the same people who are attacking immigrants in the name of rule of law, I think you can fill in the blank there. I mean, this is an administration that thinks it's above the rule of law, and here it is. It just created a new division of HHS specifically to help people violate the law, to exempt themselves from anti-discrimination laws. So, you know, they're all for the rule of law if that's a way of attacking immigrants, but really they think they're above the law, and they're trying to encourage people to violate the law in the name of religion every day.
I think Nancy has finally lost her silver linings vibe.
Hi, thank you all for your great presentation and discussion. My name is Ari Gutierrez. I'm with the Latino Equality Alliance. And, you know, as you mentioned earlier that, you know, last week we lost a member of our transgender community. We also learned about another, what seems to be a hate crime, you know, multiple stabbings in Orange County with Blaze. But recently there was another shocking death in our community, and that was of a little boy named Gabriel, who was a victim of parents. And so, unfortunately, I don't know that that type of hate would be different under a different administration. So my challenge to you in question, with all your expertise and advocacy, what can we do about children and their protections in our society today? LGBT children.
So actually, we're researching right now what we can do legislatively at the state to protect our children who, unfortunately, not only are so vulnerable, but they depend on their caregivers. And if those caregivers, I mean, it was awful to hear the story. And we're quite limited, unfortunately, at the state to try to figure out what we can do, but we continue to research on what more we can do to provide these protections for our LGBT youth that continue to be exploited and murdered on the hands of their parents or caregivers.
You know, it's a tragic story, and I think family rejection of LGBT kids is a real problem that has really often, sadly, horrific consequences. One of the things that our research shows is that LGBT kids are overrepresented in the foster care system, and I suspect that it is family rejection that is part of the reason for that. Laws, I think, can help after the fact, and if hate crimes are perpetrated by parents, they're not immune from prosecution under hate crime statutes. But of course, you don't want to, wait until you have to prosecute people. You want to intervene at the front end to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And I really do think that it is changing hearts and minds and working in communities and building conversations, whether it is setting up neighborhood advisory things or having chapters of PFLAG come and talk to people in the community, or giving students some place at school or with social service counselors where they can report if they are feeling threatened or anxious in their homes. I think it is at the very community level that we're best situated to try to really prevent these tragic things from happening.
And I think usually all those services are not in our K through 12 schools or in the elementary school level where, this tragically happens. And we as a state are trying to figure out how do we now provide the resources to ensure that these protections, these services are allowed to be given at the elementary school level, which then creates, that issue of are we trying to legislate human behavior? Are we legislating? We can't legislate to stop hate, unfortunately. But we want to do what we're talking about in the Williams Institute at the elementary school level and empower elementary school children. And we know, at least I can speak for myself in elementary school, I already knew, and I was much more aware of what my rights were or what I can do to protect myself. And providing those services at the elementary school level is pivotal. And it gets a little controversial, I'm not going to lie, but we know we need to be in our grammar schools.
I know that the local Los Angeles LGBT Community Center does a lot of, they have a lot of resources for LGBT youth. But you're right, my silver lining is gone because now I have to add something pretty disturbing to the mix, which is if you look at the nationwide outside of California, we were successful in defeating all of the anti-transgender bills that were proposed in state legislatures last year. What we were not successful in defeating, what got passed more than anything else, was state legislation attacking LGBT youth. And I'm not talking about transgender youth in facilities. I'm talking about youth in out-of-home care, foster kids. There have been bills passed in several states just last year, and adding to the mix, there's about half a dozen states now that say that religiously affiliated foster care services and out-of-youth care facilities can discriminate against LGBT youth. They can deny same-sex foster parents the right to foster kids or adopt. Some of these statutes are so broadly written that we're extremely worried they could be used to force reparative therapy on kids. If you haven't heard about reparative therapy, it's based on junk science, and it's kind of torture. It really tries to force the gay out of children. All of these things could potentially happen under some of these state laws. This is a trend that we have been not as successful in pushing back.
And I would just say two very quick more things. The first is kids, I think, can also engage in some amount of self-help. And we just recently released a report that had what to us was a surprising finding that 27% of teenagers in California think that people see them as gender nonconforming. That's a huge number. And if kids recognize that there are a lot of people like them, I think that can be helpful, and they can come together to try to find the community support that maybe they're not getting at home. The final thing I would say is stay tuned for a report about conversion therapy, which will deeply trouble you. So we'll be coming out.
Yes, that'll be an episode of American Horror Story. We have.
Okay, so my name is Ana Castro, and I'm not an activist. I am a parent of a transgender child. I am an immigrant. My daughter just graduated from Columbia University this past summer. I'm very proud of her. I'm not proud of her just because she graduated from Columbia University. I'm proud of her. I always been proud of her since she was a baby, when she told me she was gay when she was 13 years old. And even when she came out to me as being transgender when she was 19 years old. I was being proud of my daughter. She's really amazing. And I also volunteer in PFLAG. I go talk to parents. I try to help them understand their kids and accept them and love them and be proud of them. And I'm also out and proud. Everywhere I go, I tell people that know me from having a son that I don't have a son, I have a daughter. I had to do that also at work. I'm a civilian employee. I work for LAPD. And that was really hard. What would you tell me when I have to go to work and people don't ask me about my daughter anymore? it's really hard to have a conversation with people when I cannot mention my daughter because it's silence. They're afraid of me. I guess after me making a complaint about hearing a lot of, homophobic jokes and comments and using religion, when I did that, that's when they started to, everything changed for me. It used to be like when they knew that my daughter got into Columbia University, they were so proud of my daughter. They used to ask me every day, how's, back then when my daughter was perceived as my son, they would ask me, how's your son? Every single day, all day long, everybody. And everything changed. Silent. And it hurts me as a parent because it doesn't hurt. I don't care that I'm in the back corner and I cannot join conversations because everybody talks about their kids, everybody talks about their family, but I can't talk about my daughter because nobody's there for that. And that's really hard, but I don't care. I don't care if I'm bringing about, something shocking them or something different to them. I'm okay with it. What about, I guess, I know there's other parents. I know one parent from where I work came to me and said, thank you, and he had tears in his eyes. He was a witness of these jokes and comments, but he never spoke up, and he won to this day. Another coworker told me, look, they have a picture of the Pope in their desk, and I feel really bad, and I had to go and tell supervisors, hey, she's getting offended by this. It's like I have to be the one telling them when something's going on, like I have to be the one. Isn't that something the supervisors should be doing? Do I have to be doing it and keep looking like the bad guy? I don't care if I look like the bad guy. But, what can I do about that? Or is that okay? Or, I don't know. Any comments? And I guess I need some empowerment words.
We love you. We love you, and we love your daughter. And keep standing up and keep talking about it and keep telling everybody you know. And the more people that get to know you are going to love you. We love you.
I think the parent perspective and their experience through our coming out, our transition, is what I kept on thinking in her story, is taking into account the parents and what they have to go through. But I would just tell you how proud I am of you as a mother. You are the shining example of who we really are as human beings. And I would tell you, and I know you feel this way, I don't care about what anybody thinks. What you've done with your daughter empowered her to be herself, to now, graduate from Columbia University, is what really embodies you and your achievements as a woman and as a mother, and I want to congratulate you for that.
And another question.
Hi there. I'm with the Sex Workers Outreach Project. Recently, our organization was part of the coalition that helped draft SB 239, which modernized California's HIV law. So I wanted to thank Senator Lara, as well as the Williams Institute and Lambda Legal for their work on that bill. So thank you. My question is, due to various forms of education and employment discrimination, many in the LGBT community turn to the sex trade as a means of survival. There are those who are trafficked via force, fraud, or coercion, and others who engage in sex work consensually because it provides them economic support. Because prostitution is criminalized, many LGBT folks remain vulnerable to violence from clients, predators, intimate partners, and even police with very little recourse. The case of Jamel Moore's murder by Ed Buck here in Los Angeles is an example of this. My question is, how do we work to make sure that LGBT sex workers and victims of trafficking are protected and not ignored or further criminalized when they try to report violence against them?
Well, it was not without controversy, but Lambda Legal did actually sign on to an amicus brief in the case about the decriminalization of sex work, because it does disproportionately affect people in the LGBT community who are kind of forced on the streets because of their circumstances. And it is in line with our general beliefs that if, since Lawrence versus Texas overturned Bowers versus Hardwick, it is the case that really private adult consensual behavior should be constitutionally protected. So there's the legal court battle angle of it, but then of course there's legislatively it's going to be even trickier.
Right. So what we're doing, it's similar to what we did on our anti-bullying laws. I mean, we've had like 10 years of anti-bullying laws in the state, but we still see this pervasive bullying happening in our schools. So we're in the midst of doing an audit to figure out what's really happening at the school level. Are people implementing these protections by school districts? What is the assessment? And I'm actually gonna do another audit request this session to look at our employment laws, our anti-discrimination policies. What is happening, because we know, and particularly our transgender workers, are some crazy number of like 70 to 80% have encountered discrimination in the workplace, which leads to either them willingly leaving their employment because of the constant discrimination, or are actually assaulted at work and have no other recourse that they feel or understand or know, and so they leave the job. And we've had case after case where the manager says, it's becoming too much of a problem, we're going to have to let you go. Well, no, there's protections in California for you as a worker, as a transgender employee. And so we're going to make an assessment this year of all the laws that we have in place and figure out where those holes exist and where are some missed opportunities that we can further educate employers and our LGBTQ workers on what their rights are. Unfortunately, just like what we've seen in just the analysis that we've gotten so far, is that not even teachers know what the anti-bullying laws are at the school. It's the actual student who's being bullied who knows more about their rights than the actual administrator at that school. Unfortunately, that is not happening at our LGBT community in the workforce. They don't seem to know what their rights are. And that's not only for the employer, but for the employee as well. So we have to do an assessment ourselves as well as a state on what we're doing right and what we can improve on. And this is why we're doing that audit request this session.
So as you can tell, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of things on the horizon. I have a question for all of you, and that is Saturday, the 20th, is the Women's March. Raise of hands, who's marching? We need this year to be bigger than last year. We need to make sure that President Trump knows that the momentum is still in our favor and that we are going to keep our eyes on him and his administration. You heard today that departments are not being funded, that councils are being disbanded, that laws are being passed that are discriminating against us, and that judges are being appointed and confirmed that are going to impact all of us in this room for the next 20, 30, 40 years. We really, really need to get to work. The first thing I want to do, though, is thank this distinguished panel. Jocelyn Samuels from the Williams Institute, Senator Ricardo Lara, and Nancy Marcus from Lambda. We're so grateful that you came. There's going to be a reception in the rotund, so let's all chat there. And thank you so much for coming. What an incredible turnout.